Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Prism coming to you from Edinburgh, but not where we expected it to be. As we advertised and promoted, we were doing a live audience show last night in the centre of Edinburgh with the Edinburgh Laku, and it went very well, except we were using all that wonderful new equipment that, due to the generosity of your good selves and Flagship Media Group, but we had a failure on a sound card. So we get fantastic video, but the sound was non-existent. So unfortunately, we can't bring you that show and all the comments that came from the wonderful viewers and guests that we had there. But we will be returning to Edinburgh sometime in the not too distant future to do that once again to make up for that. But we do have some nice shots we can show you of the quality of our video. If we can't show you the quality of the sound, Techie, can you put? There you go. There was the group last night with a lovely and wonderful grouse beater. But unfortunately, he's not with us today, but is a bonus for you, because we're now at this time of the day, and it's because All Other One Banner has also been cancelled after coming here. It's cancelled. We have got our man from North Dakota, which is pretty early in the morning for him, but we've got Mr. Boswell with us.
Howdy.
We're needing you to bail us out. We've had a disastrous weekend so far.
Yeah, and weather's normally highly disruptive here because we get like feet of snow and you can't go anywhere. But no, that's a real shame. A real shame that All Under Wonder Banners, All Wonder Banner. But I guess she was out last night and is up a wee bit early. No, it's a shame. I wish I was there. I'd love to go because I know the team is going to have a great time in Edinburgh. Great city, great fun party town. And obviously staying through with John and Hazel, it'll be a great laugh. I wish I was there.
I love Edinburgh, especially the M8 to Glasgow. Talking of Edinburgh, who better than our weatherman who should have on today? I want to know why he didn't warn us what was going to happen. It's Mr. Quinnen.
How are you? That's a shame about last night. There was some really good stuff in that, but bigger shame today though. The weather's spoiled it for the march, but hey, it's only the first time they've had to cancel one, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. So thanks for joining in again, Lloyd. So here we are, and of course, up from the Clackmannanshire, we have our wonderful lawyer, Eva. I think we have Eva. There she is.
Hiya, Roddy.
Nope, she's going again. There we go, Eva. Welcome back. Long time no see, huh?
I can hardly contain the excitement of seeing you twice in less than 24 hours.
Okay, you're only human, Eva. Don't fight it. Nice to see you. And down there on the borders, our own Shirley Temple Vaughan Ridley.
Hi, Roddy. It's got
a feeling. Unfortunate about last night.
Well, it was a brilliant night, and it was great to see so many familiar faces and new ones as well. But what a shame! I'm hearing rumours that the British state pulled the plug. I don't know who it is. Dirty dark horses.
I wish we could say that. It would make it sound intriguing. It really would. But unfortunately, no, it's not the British spokesman, unless they supplied the sound card that went tits up. I don't know. Maybe they did. I don't know. But anyway, here we are. And we did start the night with a couple of questions from viewers. And I'm going to do the exact same. And it doesn't matter if you repeat yourself, because no one except us will know you're repeating yourself and the lovely people that were there. So you can even throw in the same jokes if we did. And the first one came from a really good friend of this show and a good viewer and a really nice person, a hard worker, over there in Skye, the island of the clouds, and that's from Lita Halliburton. And she asked if that women and LGBT people need a party in Scotland that they can trust with their human rights. Will ALBA leadership be prepared to ignore collateral damage in women's and LGBT human rights if they think that they're not gaining sufficient membership and amount of votes from women and LGBT? Will we be ditched for a deal with the SNP under any leadership of any stripe? weakened enough to agree a Scotland United strategy. I'm concerned that Alba are going to lose the women and LGB members and voters by continuing with the Scotland United strategy. But if the leadership are convinced that Alba will gain seats in 2026, are they prepared to make us the collateral damage? Now, I've got to say, we're not the leadership of the Alba party, and the policy for the upcoming general election, Scotland United, has not been confirmed. We'll get conference later this month. We will give our opinion, but please remember, this is our opinion. It's not necessarily the full opinion of the party. And because it's that question, I think it's best to start with you, Eva. Would you care to answer that one?
Thanks, Roddy. This is a very valid question coming from Lita, because all of us here, but particularly the women, will be very mindful of women's rights being thrown under the bus by Nicola Sturgeon and others. And one incident that springs to mind immediately is that dreadful broom cupboard video that Nicola Sturgeon did, pleading with some youngsters who were threatening to or had actually deserted the SNP to come back again. But I think the result in Rutherglen and Hamilton West shows that women in their droves who used to support the SNP have already walked away. Well, if they want to find a political home in Alba, they're more than welcome, because I assisted in drafting the Women and Equality Statement, which on behalf of Alba guarantees absolutely that when we say sex, we mean biological sex, because there is no other kind of sex. And when we say sex, we mean sex, not gender, because we don't believe in gender ideology. And what we say is that the single-sex protections and services and rights of the Equality Act of 2010 should be enshrined in a written constitution in an independent Scotland. So under no circumstances will single-sex protections or the rights of women or any form of equalities enshrined in that legislation be up for grabs or on any negotiating table at any time for as long as the Alba party exists. And if there's anybody in Alba that wants to argue with me about that or debate that point at all, bring it on, because I will debate that till kingdom come. Women's rights are not for sale. They are not a bargaining chip. So anybody in the party that thinks they are, or that there are compromises to be made, better think again or come ahead.
Thank you for that. Yvonne, as the Equalities convener in the Alba party, how do you respond to this question from Lita?
I'm the women's convener.
We're not a kiss, right? I do it every time I do it.
But actually, it's okay, because women's rights are equality rights as well. So it's easy to get the pair of us mixed up. But, you know, I'm with Eva on this. There are some things in politics that you can do U-turns on, that you can revise or go back on. This is in tablets of stone. And while I know that some men cannot get their heads around why this has been allowed to become such a big political issue, I can say quite unequivocally that if this is watered down, if Alba's position is watered down in any way, shape or form, they'll have me to deal with, because, you know, hell will freeze over before Alba dilutes its position on women. You know, as I said last night, women are 51% of the population in Scotland, and we gave birth to the other 49%. So we know exactly where women are positioned, women's rights. Eva wrote the Alba position on women, and you can read it on the website, and it's there for all to see, and it couldn't be clearer. Women's rights are not negotiable.
Okay.
And we are the only party that actually takes that position.
Yeah. Lloyd, I appreciate it's not your party, it's not your policy, you can't answer that, but just on a general view of should women's rights be sacrificed for the greater good, what's your opinion on that?
No, women's rights can never be sacrificed. in any circumstances whatsoever. I mean, effectively what's going on at the moment is women's rights are being sacrificed for the tiny portion of trans people that there are. And that in itself is wrong. It's clearly wrong. But why anyone suggesting that there need be any dilution of the ALPA position on women's rights, I don't really understand, because I think it's now becoming clear we're over the hump with this anti-science nonsense. It's on the wane, and it's really, really important that any organisation like For Women Scotland or ALPA or any of the number of organisations hold the line here. It's absolutely essential that happens. There can't be backroom deals over something which is a clear black and white issue. Certainly in my mind, and it's also an issue that is becoming tired with the youngsters as well. I mean, my daughter's 15, and most of her and her pals, it does impact their lives, particularly at school, because of some of the crazy guidance that's going on. But they know that it's over, because they can tell the difference between a boy, a girl, and a boy. That's just a reality, and they understand that there's an element of parents indulging certain kids for the sake of a quiet life. But to get back to the central point, and yeah, you're right, I'm not a member of the ALPA party. I think it's important they hold the line. Don't be squeezed in any kind of a way, because the women are winning this. And that's the really important bit, is that women are winning, preserving their rights and hopefully extending their rights as a result of this.
Here. So on the same topic, there was a lot of when I think came out, a lot of the ladies in the audience last night were just saying, under no circumstances can they, if there's a Scotland United campaign, can they vote? They can't vote for the SNP as long as they have their GRR stuff in their portfolio, if you like, or in their policy. They can't be blamed for saying that, can they? But it makes the Scotland United thing completely very difficult to bring together.
Yeah, it's a win for the unionists, and that's what it's designed to do. This SNP has been infiltrated. Anybody who denies it is, I don't know what else we can do to show you. I don't know what has to happen to prove that the SNP have been infiltrated, no longer represent, listening to the words of Mr. Ewing recently, they have been infiltrated and no longer represent a party that's prime directive is Scottish independence. They're a gravy train, Patrick. They say they're exactly the same as the other parties, as Labour and Tory now, and they will do what they're told. So the answer here is to get rid of the leadership and get back to where we were. But I think one of the critical issues here is, no, women's rights, nobody's going to back away from that. You're an idiot if you do that, and I think the common sense, it will prevail, as Lloyd says. It's starting to come through. People are beginning to see through this sham. But for me, women's rights do need, I don't think you need a party to stick up for women's rights and a separate party for LGBT. ALBA, and I know it was comments that Alex Salmon recently made about getting away from trans rights. We stand up for trans rights. Just do it properly. Don't erode women's rights. LGBT rights and women's rights are not incompatible. They're not incompatible. What we need to do is be pragmatic about it and not childish. This children's politics of, we saw it with Mary Black, what she did, with the Rutherglen Hamilton by-election, when she says, it's my ball, I'm not playing. If my preferred candidate doesn't get in, I'm leaving the party. He's a staff member of mine for 10 years. Nepotism, and what happened to democracy? This is a democratic process we should be following here. And Lita's question is excellent because it touches on a lot of contentious issues. But the big one for me is obviously freedom of speech, human rights, LGBT rights, people's rights. Defending people's rights should not be incompatible with other people's rights. So you've got to give and take. You cannot get it all your own way. You've got to be mindful of others. And this is where the LGBT trans right radicals And it's the activists, it's not those poor souls going through the transition. It's these activists and those that are playing games with it and with their egos. And there's a lot of mental health issues associated with this, leading into LG, whether you're trans rights or as a result of going through the trauma and drama of feeling this way and being different and being treated different. So no, we support, as human beings, LGBT community, people going through trans rights, and of course women's rights. I think only a fool would argue against defending both.
Yeah. Eva, here's the thing. We've had a lot of people I know, people who are supporters of this show and of the party and of independence, who said to me, Roddy, you can't keep doing this to Scotland United. Now, if we could just, hypothetically, if you take out LGBT rights, it goes back to 2014 when we were absolutely united. We need unity, but there has to be huge compromise. And I've got to say, the compromise has got to come from the largest grouping, which is the SNP. Would the recent results and setbacks I've had in the elections make them see sense that they're losing ground? I mean, we keep seeing opinion polls showing that independence is at 50, 51, 52%, and they get 29% in a by-election this week. Will they see sense, drop this divisive policies and unite the movement? And if not, can we hold the line on Scotland United, or do we have to say, sorry, we can't participate?
It's very difficult to hold the line in the face of what seems to be very stupid intransigence on the part of the leadership of the SNP, because in the run-up to Thursday's poll, what you had was repeated guff about the wonderful reception the SNP were getting on the doors, when everybody knew that the opposite was the case. We all knew that. It was no surprise. We knew long before polling day that Labour were odds on to win, and they probably won an even bigger margin than they themselves expected. But when you analyse the figures, the Labour vote was actually less than they've had previously. Of course, the turnout was a lot lower, but Labour didn't get their vote out to the extent that they want you to think they did. So any question of a Labour surge is also a bit of a joke and a misnomer. The real difficulty is the SNP vote stayed at home. And the SNP leadership have to own that. You know, Hamza Yousaf has to accept that his voters didn't come out. And they didn't come out for a combination of reasons. Firstly, a lot of them didn't want to support the SNP because they had seen how Margaret Ferrier had been shafted. And they could see that a very dedicated supporter of independence had been sacrificed unnecessarily. So that began the campaign with a very bad taste and in difficult circumstances. Gender recognition reform and a former First Minister who said that female objections were not valid, compounded difficulties. We've then had the ignominy of the suspension of both Angus Brendan McNeill and Fergus Ewing, because basically they were speaking common sense to power, and in Fergus's case, obviously on innumerable occasions, supporting the rights and the interests of his constituents. So if you're an independence-minded party, you can't do all these things, support all these stupid policies which are not popular or sensible. In that, I include the debacle of the deposit return scheme and the highly protected marine areas stramash, which was very badly handled too. Throw into the mix the A9, the ferries, education, wage disputes, and all of a sudden what you've got is a government that is no longer competent. But that incompetence has festered since Sturgeon took over at the end of 2014. It's just got progressively worse, in part because she surrounded herself with sycophants who, in the main, particularly in recent years, have been underqualified and over-promoted, to put it mildly. From a professional perspective, we've got innumerable areas of the law which are causing concern. We've got an expensive, unnecessary battle with Westminster in relation to the Section 35. We've got the gender recognition court action. We're pouring money down the drain unnecessarily and repeatedly. we've just wasted, was it £85 million on the deposit return scheme? And at the same time as all of this is going on, we've got people going hungry, we've got gas and electricity bills through the roof, we've got supermarket shelves that in some places are bare, but food bank shelves are also bare because the people that used to donate to them can no longer afford so to do. Our people are hungry, they're cold, they're scared. And what do you have? You have a leadership who are signally incapable of lighting a fire under the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election and turning it into what it should have been, which was a battle on the Constitution. The I word was hardly ever mentioned in the debate at all. If the ISP hadn't been standing, you probably would never have heard the word independence. And you certainly never heard it coming from the lips of anybody on the SNP. So if Scotland is to flourish, then the SNP leadership need to do what they've not done in the days since that result and eat humble pie. Lift the phone, Humza. Speak to Alec. Speak to Colette. Speak to Tommy Sheridan. Speak to all the people across the independence movement who would have something worthwhile to contribute to an independence convention, and call the convention for Monday morning. Monday at 10 o'clock, you can all meet in Edinburgh, sit round the table and start drawing the battle lines for a battle with Westminster, because that is what Scotland needs. If that kind of thing doesn't happen and happen soon, the Scotland United plan will be dead in the water, and people like me and Yvonne will need to think very seriously about challenging the likes of John Nicholson and Alan Smith and Kirsty Blackman and all of those who think that women with views such as mine and Yvonne's are not valid, because these are the people who went to Westminster to fight for independence and instead pursued their own identity politics and their foreign travels. So these are the people who don't deserve to continue to represent Scotland, and I wouldn't trust them so to do. I will vote for them in a Scotland United context, but if they're not going to pick up that challenge, then I would be happy to help to kick them into touch.
Here. Yvonne, one of the favourite things that when you listen to any by-election, at any time, anywhere, all the politicians around the table manage to talk about how they've actually won it when they've lost badly, and then the famous, well, lessons have been learned. I don't know how many times I've heard that over the decades. Will the SNP have learned any lessons? Will it penetrate them that they need to change direction?
No lessons have been learned at all. I listened to Humza Yousaf being interviewed yesterday, and he said that they lost because of voter anger against Margaret Ferrier is the reason. And he said it about 3 times in this 90-second clip. I mean, he takes us all for fools, but there's only one village that's missing its idiot, Humza, and that's in Broughty Ferry in Dundee, about 100 miles from his own constituency, but that's where he lives. I mean, it was a crazy thing to say. It was a cowardly thing to say. I mean, how many more times are they going to whip Margaret Ferrier? The woman has been tried in Westminster. She's been investigated by the police. She's gone through various different kangaroo courts, not least of all with the SNP. I mean, it's like something from the Salem witch trials. And she, wasn't even standing, and she still gets the blame. When the SNP vote collapses, which it will elsewhere, are they going to continue to blame Margaret Ferrier? And we can't forget that Margaret Ferrier, yes, she was wrong to travel when she had COVID, but it was at a time, it must have been terrifying for her and she obviously panicked and jumped on a train and wanted to get home as quickly as possible when she was positively identified as being having COVID. But she wasn't the only politician who did this. Rishi Sunak got fined 50 quid. Boris Johnson and Partygate is still rumbling on. And then that bloody useless King, Charles, infected with COVID. So what does he decide to do? Up sticks with his royal entourage and come to bloody Scotland and infect all of us with his bloody royal COVID. And yet none of them have gone through anything, any of the persecution that Margaret Ferrier has gone through. And he's, you know, she's still being blamed. The hatred, the SNP hatred for Ferrier is intense and irrational. You know, the SNP threw everything at Rutherglen, apart from the kitchen sink. I mean, I was half expecting Paul Gascoigne to turn up with a Greg's pasty and a fishing rod, claiming to be a friend of Cathy Loudon, or London, as Kirsty Blackman called her, in yet another of her foot and mouth moments. And the Westminster bubble, they still failed to read Scottish politics. Eva's right. This was not a great victory for Labour. Their vote was actually down for the 5th consecutive general election or by-election running. So, you know, they pulled a victory out of the jaws of defeat. And yet Starmer jumps on a plane, comes to Scotland and starts talking about sweeping through Parliament. And, you know, for goodness sake, get over yourself. You've gone from 1 to 2 MPs. This is not a cause for victory. And on the subject of Starmer, he's holding his party conference in that great northern city of Liverpool. Mm-hmm. And he's still writing a column in the Sun newspaper, which is, it's still banned in parts of Liverpool. And he's trampling over the Hillsborough dead by doing this. And he's just got no feeling at all for the working classes there, for the Hillsborough 97. He's a vile, vile man. And we shouldn't have given him any quarter in Scotland. In fact, if we'd been coming up the A68 on Carter Bar, I might have just put a sentry on duty and stopped him from coming up. I mean, why are the only interest Westminster has in Scotland these days is to come and plunder our oil, plunder our energy, plunder our resources. You know, at least Dick Turpin had the decency to wear a mask, but these robbers just come up barefaced and just take and take. And the ones that are left behind are thinking, oh, this is a nice place. And they're putting in gated communities and inviting their rich friends up to enjoy the wonderful nation that is Scotland. I mean, how much more humiliation are we going to take?
I think there's a while to go. There's a while to go. What, Lloyd, you've been like myself around a long while. You've heard that lesson. It's your party. Do you think lessons will have been learned?
I think lessons will be learned by people who know how to learn a lesson. I don't think anything will be learned. I think there will be excuses from the campaign team, from the National Executive Committee and from the Cabinet. They will seek around for excuses, and that was clear from what, I mean, I watched the same interview as Yvonne did. And to watch the First Minister of Scotland effectively blame a single individual for what was an outbreak of extreme political naivety on the behalf of the SNP, even to remove Margaret. I find it hard to see that they will learn lessons from this, but you've got to hope. I mean, I think that's really, you know, the place I'm in is you hope that there will be that revelation, that they will suddenly see the light before them and at the end of the dark tunnel. But I'm not getting a sense of that looking on, particularly on the social media of some of the elected members of the SNP who are scrabbling around for all manner of excuses. But I think the key thing here is, and it's very, very important for us to know this, is that the Labour result is actually a large reduction in their vote, even on the last election. But 5 in a row, they've been losing votes. If the SNP voters stayed at home, there's a lesson for them as well. Indeed, there's a lesson for both major political parties. If less than 40% of the electorate, when there's been the media focus so strongly on that constituency, less than 40% of the people turn out, then everybody's giving the wrong message. That's the first lesson, is the wrong message is there. Because if the people are not motivated to come out, then you're not telling them something that's motivating them to come out. It's simple stuff. But I fear that there will be a doubling down in the SNP. The blame will be placed everywhere else, because that's the culture this current group of the leadership have grown up in. You know, the past 8 years under Mrs. Murrow, in actual fact, has been a period where no one accepted responsibility for anything. Everything was someone else's fault. And I think that's the mindset they have, and that's the way they're going to approach it. I hope better counsel, maybe with his freedom now, Fergus can maybe make some influence that might make them look at things in a slightly different way. But in real terms, this is a message to all the political parties. And indeed, it's a message for us as well. Why did people not come out? What is it that we're not talking about? What is it that's not inspiring people? Those are the things we need to find. It's not what actually happened. It's what didn't happen that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to pull you up on one thing. You called it political naivety, Lloyd. I would call it political malice by the previous First Minister. There was no need to go after Margaret in the first place. She could have been internally disciplined. She could have been called into Edinburgh and said, listen, don't be, you're putting us in an embarrassing position. They could have given her small weeks. They could have done all sorts of things. So I call it malice.
Alternately, Roddy, what they could have done, and the sensible political thing to do, which is what I said last night when somebody asked me, what they should have done is fought for Margaret Ferrier, used the party gate, used Boris, used King. Well, he wasn't the king at the time, but you know the royal trip to Scotland, used that as a positive, and actually backed her up. Instead, they did the assassin's job for them, and that left them in a place where they've told their own supporters they're not to be trusted because they show no loyalty to their own people. And so why would a voter show loyalty to them? And on the other hand, they effectively gifted a seat to the Labour Party. It's an absurdity, an absolute absurdity.
Yeah. Phil, goodbye to 2017, which we remember well. It was probably in my lifetime the worst ever campaign by the Scottish National Party, who we were directed not to use the independence word when on the street stalls or on the doorsteps, which I found, I mean, that's what actually brought me into blogging. I was horrified. And what happened? Our people stayed at home. As Eva has alluded to earlier, they weren't using the independence word. That's what motivates our movement. You know, Lloyd's saying, well, what's missing? Well, I would suggest independence is what motivates our people, our support. And when I say ours, I mean the Yes movement, not necessarily any one particular party. That's what motivates them. They didn't use it. They were using all sorts of other nonsense, equality and nonsense, but they didn't promote independence. That proved for one thing. The Tory vote collapsed. None of you mentioned that yet so far. The Tory vote collapsed. It was the Tory vote that went to the Labour Party, not the SNP vote or the independence vote. The independence vote stayed at home. They didn't even support Poor Colette. That is, to me, the secret. We need to be campaigning on independence, nothing else.
Absolutely, and it's lessons learned. It's a con game. It's glib sound bites from politicians that you can expect. Nobody really believes that is genuine. They're just trying to save face or puts a silver lining on this particular dark cloud for SNP. It's a thumping defeat. But the lessons learned are lessons that we and everybody really already knows, that the Yes movement philosophy, the Scotland United approach, is the only way to do it. The only fly in the ointment, if you will, is SNP's incalcitrance, the fact that they refuse to give in on issues that are clearly hurting them and the independence movement. It's hurting the party, but it's not hurting the individuals who remain on the gravy train. So all you've got is a smaller and smaller pool of people trying to make sure they get the warmest seat or the biggest seat or the closest to the front or the closest to the dining carriage on the gravy train. That's what's happening now. It's selfish, self-serving individuals like Humza Useless, who is just serving his own interest. No, the principle of Scotland United, we proved it with the Yes movement, and the SNP leadership is the problem. I mean, you get Keir Starmer coming out with stuff, I'm heading to number 10, this is a seismic swing. The numbers are down, as we've said, and you know, there's something I saw on GB News. I want to see what the opposition are saying. And GB News, a guy, Patrick Christie, a journalist and broadcaster, a unionist, he's got an article. He says we should give, and I'll quote, I've got it over here, we should give Humza Yousaf a knighthood for services to the United Kingdom, thanks to him being about as popular as Novichok in the Scottish independence movement. The Scottish independence campaign is dead in the water. Arise, Sir Humza, saviour of the Union. Now, he's tongue-in-cheek, but he's not far from the truth, because that's the reality. You know, Humza said, he went on to say, Humza Yousaf has said the buck stops with him. Too right it does. I wonder at what point it will emerge that Humza has been working deep undercover for the Unionists all along. He's not working deep undercover for them, he's just doing what he's told by them, because they control what he says. Now, there are a couple of things on the results. I mean, the 2023 results, this guy Michael Shanks got 17,845 votes. You know, when he was the previous person that took on Margaret in the 2019 election got 18,545 votes. It's down. SNP down from 23,700 under Margaret to 8,300, or just under 8,400 in that recent one. And the Tories, 1,192 in the 23 election, down from 8,054. Now, the numbers don't lie. It's pretty obviously it's been gamed, and that's what we know. We know how to game it. That's what the Unionists are doing, and this is an appalling. This is a poor turnout. And we undoubtedly, what those numbers illustrate is that the SNP vote, or the independence vote, stayed at home, and it's nothing to do with Margaret. That they're unhappy with policy. What the voters are unhappy with is the way Margaret was treated by an uncaring leadership who care more about these they're imposed policies. These are not natural policies for the Scottish people. We are naturally inclined to protect all rights. We would never jeopardise women's rights for the sake of a small minority, but we would certainly be passionate about protecting the underdog. This is why, let's get back to trans rights. We all support the rights of trans people going through this very difficult issue, but it needs to be supported in the right way. And the way the specifics on the policy that the SNP have right now is to allow self-identification. That's the issue. I do not believe a child who doesn't know whether it wants Cocoa Pops or cornflakes for breakfast can decide if he's going to be a boy or a girl. No, not without the support of professionals and adults and the involvement of the parents. So no, their virtue signalling is damaging the cause. They don't see it because they're arrogant, selfish, and self-serving.
Absolutely. We've covered a wee bit of the next questions. A viewer's question from Barry Sinclair, who some of your viewers will know better as Nightmaker1979 on Twitter. And so I'll abbreviate it if you don't mind, Barry, just a wee bit, because we are covering it. But he was suggesting with the drubbing they got, the SNP, what advice, Eva, would you give to Humza to correct the mistake? And then I'll come to his second question later, but what advice would you give Humza?
Well, I really relished Phil's description just now of the gaming of the system. And I think that it would be worthwhile for Humza to cast his mind back to the Scottish elections of 2021 and remember that that's what Nicola Sturgeon accused Alex Salmond and the Alba Party of trying to do then, was gaming the system, and that was somehow wrong. But if the SNP had joined with Alba and had gamed the system in 2021, what's the betting that an awful lot of things that have happened since would not have happened, and other events which have not occurred would have? So I would suggest that if the independence movement had learned to game the system and had done so in 2021, and we'd had a supermajority for independence in Holyrood then, I would suggest that A, Scotland would now be independent, B, we would be members of EFTA and we'd be trading with Europe, C, we would not have had a reverse wind auction, D, we might have had a national energy company, E, we might have had a national house building corporation, F, we might have had a universal basic income, G, we might have had proper universal free education available for all. You know, the list is endless once we have control of our own resources and our budget is used to benefit the people of Scotland, and our resources are not stolen to bankroll Westminster or to pay millions in fraudulent PPE and related type claims as occurred during COVID. So all that Hamza has to do is very, very simple. Lift the phone, speak to those other leaders in the independence movement, get the finger out towards an independence convention, a Scotland United campaign, and an understanding that internationally 50% plus one of the votes cast for independence supporting parties is what is needed. Not a majority of seats, but a majority of votes. The SNP on current showing will not attain a majority of votes at a Westminster election. That is not possible. They will not do it. Scotland United can. And, you know, it's trite to say it. Scotland United cannot be defeated because in Scotland there is, we know, a majority support for independence, and that's before we've got a concerted campaign or a convention or a date or a specific electoral event. 2014 proved that when there's a date to work towards, support for independence surges, particularly with a positive campaign where there is unity of purpose and what Alec this week described as seriousness of intent. So if there is seriousness of intent at the heart of the Scottish Government and the SNP, then this weekend we'll see cooperation and rapprochement between the SNP and Alba. There are no circumstances which will ever be better than the circumstances faced now by Scotland. You know, the union is weak. It will become weaker, and that is the time for us to pounce. We should be making hay now while the unionists are in disarray. So that's the lesson Hamza has to learn. He has to implement it. His failure so to do will not go down well, either with supporters of independence or in the history books.
No, you're absolutely right. I've spoken to a lot of Irish friends who said the same. They made their moves when the British were at their weakest or been kept busy elsewhere. That's when the Irish made their move. We should be doing the same. And on that same topic, Yvonne, from Barry's question, there is a majority, as we've said, for Indie. We know that. Everybody knows that. But we also know there's a majority against self-identification. There's a majority against giving kids these puberty blockers. The massive majorities when there's any that questions asked. Why won't they listen to the opinion of the people? That's what they need to do if they want a Scotland United and if they want independence. It seems to me it's more important to them to get their GRRB through than get Scotland its independence.
Well, I think GRR has been a useful distraction to destroy the SNP. And if that's what it was, whoever is behind it is a political genius, because it has destroyed the SNP. And, you know, I've said before that that I like Hamza Yusuf, and I do. I remember when I first met him. It's no use shaking your head, Phil. It's a fact. You know, I'll get on to you in a minute about Penny Mordaunt, But yeah, you know, I like Hamza Yusuf. When I first came to Scotland, he invited me up to Holyrood, and we had a good talk. And he is a nice person, and he cut his political teeth at the knee of Alex Salmond. And Alex Salmond says the same thing. You know, he's nice. He's a nice person. The thing is, he has been very, very badly advised. And he's either too thick to see it or too weak to resist it. But my advice to Hamza, and I'd say this as a friend, because his enemies are so close to him and they're not going to tell him the truth. But I say to you as a friend now, Hamza, pick up the phone and speak to Alex and start talking about a Scotland united. And I would say that to Colette Walker as well. Colette Walker stood in Rutherglen. She did a heroic campaign that is beyond question. You know, if it in terms of effort, the ISP really, they also pulled out all the stops. But their hard slog, sweat, blood and tears did not translate into votes. And so, you know, and this is something that Lloyd predicted a few weeks ago when he said it will destroy the ISP. I don't know whether it will destroy the ISP, but the reality, they've got a lot of harsh realities to face. And Colette, I would say you did your best. For God's sake, for the sake of independence, for the sake of Scotland, pick up the phone and speak to Alex. And, you know, Scotland united is the way to go forward now for all of us. And, you know, in enough numbers, we can do it. We should have done it months, years ago, if only people had listened back then. And if people have gamed the system, so what? I think it just means that Scottish voters are more savvy than their counterparts in the UK, who are, let's face it, have a two-party system, either the frying pan or the fire. That's the choice that our brothers and sisters, our comrades in England have. And the sooner that they wake up and realise that they're at the bottom of a pit of a class war, the better.
On the second part of Barry's question, Lloyd, was the fact that he was saying the current revelation that yet again the SNPHQ is gerrymandering the candidates at the behest and being blackmailed by MPs. And it was slightly, Phil alluded to it a wee bit. This where Mary Black wanted her choice and was going to leave the party if she didn't get her way, like a wee child, stamping her feet and, you know, just being a bully. It's quite disgusting and so blatant, and no one seems to be embarrassed about it within the SNP.
I think it's quite extraordinary, but what I think is most extraordinary is that this story came out, because this story could only have come from SNP headquarters. Couldn't have come from anywhere else. It either comes from Jackson's entry or the Whip's office in Westminster. Somebody is on manoeuvres, and somebody doesn't want somebody coming back into politics. It's astonishing to me, and this shows the indiscipline that there is at the top of the Scottish National Party, or the manipulation on a new Labourite level, maybe emanating from a certain Mr. Foote. No, not the nice one, that was Michael. Murray Foote's prints are all over this. Murray Foote's prints are all over this, and this damages three people. It damages Hamza, because it's the day after the day after a severe electoral loss. He is seen to be not in control of his deputy leader at Westminster. It damages the individual that Mary Black was trying to have promoted into the seat, who just happens to be the partner of a government minister. So she cops a bit of the flack as well. And thirdly, it damages Mary Black in a very, 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 very bad way. Now, that would be a dream story if you were Tory Central Office or Labour Central Office. But it didn't come from there. It came from within the Scottish National Party. And was it a cack-handed attempt to take the shine away from Labour? Or was it piling the agony on? And it looks like piling the agony on to me, because it opens up so many questions about the interconnection between family members, elected members at all levels, you know, council, Westminster and Holyrood. There are bizarre networks of cousins, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends. That's no way to run a political party. And certainly for most of my time in the Scottish National Party, it's the opposite of the way we ran the party. The party was run to elevate talent and ability. It didn't operate. I mean, the classic example of that is the Ewings. You know, Winnie, you know, pretty much everybody would do whatever Winnie asked, but she never did. Fergus got elected on Fergus's merits, and Annabelle had to wait a little bit longer. You know, there were no strings being pulled for, you know, what was some people would term, you know, the royal family of the Scottish National Party, because that in itself is wrong. It gives the wrong message. It draws the wrong people into your organisation. If people think backhanded, you know, backdoor deals can be done, then you draw in the wrong people. But then again, 2015, we got a few thousand of the bad people. And unfortunately, some of them are currently sitting on the green leather at Westminster.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, but Winnie, that's why Winnie is up there beyond reproach. I mean, no party should try and gerrymander their family and their friends, their picked people that they want to put on at the NEC, especially when, you know, there'll be people in the SNP or it happens in any party. They will know what's going on, and it only leads to division. Let's keep it above board. That's what they need to do. Eva, the last part of the question from Barry was, who should be held responsible for the avoidance of doubt for the reversals in the SNP election results, by-elections, etc. in the last 12 months? Because for 16 years, they were invincible. Who do we hold responsible?
All those people who forgot the raison d'etre of the party should be held responsible for their failing results, and also for the failures that there have been in respect of looking after the people of Scotland who trusted them with their votes. This week I did a strange Google search. I wanted to know how many washing machines there are in schools in Scotland and in the UK. I don't know the final number, but it's in its thousands, because teachers are washing children's clothes when they arrive at school, as well as feeding them, and in some cases providing clothes from school, you know, clothing banks and shoe banks for them. And I learned also this week about a friend of a friend who uses a food bank, but this is a single adult who worked for decades but fell on hard times and has been reduced to having to use a food bank, who lives on pieces, sandwiches, because they can't afford to use fuel in the house. And this person became ill because they're always at the back of the queue in the food bank, and they got vegetables that were probably, by the time they used them, a bit off, and they were ill as the result of this. I learned another friend of a friend who's a single person who was discharged from hospital to home and had nobody to look after them at home, and nobody cared enough to check on them, and the services failed them, and they became very badly ill while they were supposed to be recuperating at home. These are the things that are happening on the ground in Scotland, and it's unnecessary in a land of plenty. There are children going to school this week in the county where I live, in torrential rain and freezing cold, and they're wearing gym shoes and jerseys, and they haven't got a school coat. You know, I say it every week. There are people that are the working poor that work and graft all week, and they get to the end of the week and they've not got enough to pay their bills, let alone have a wee bit of treat or a bit of downtime. We've talked so often about drug statistics and alcohol statistics and suicide statistics. We know there is a crisis in the NHS in Scotland. Let's not pretend about it. Every one of us here has got friends who've waited too long for tests or for care or for discharge or for an operation. We all know friends that have tried to pay privately for surgery because they're waiting too long for it. 2 and 3 years for a knee or a hip operation. In Scotland, the land that discovered oil in the 1960s, for God's sake. You know, we need a swear box in here, because this is just getting absolutely intolerable. The reason why our people are living like this and we're reduced to this is because those that we trusted to get our independence were too cowardly or too mired in self-interest to get the job done. And we cannot make that mistake again, because the people of Scotland deserve and demand far, far better. So whose fault is it? It's Humza Yousaf's fault, and it's Nicola Sturgeon's fault, it's Peter Morell's fault, it's Keith Brown's fault. You know, my MSP, the former Justice Secretary, sitting on the telly the other night analysing what went wrong. You don't need to be on the telly to analyse what went wrong. We all know what went wrong. They didn't do the job they were elected to do, and they're still not doing it.
Yeah. Fired up there, Eva. Yvonne, you know, for years we watched Labour talking, and I go back to this, we learned lessons type of thing, and they knew that the Constitution, they had to get it, but they wouldn't. They just kept walking away from it, and they still walk away from it and refuse to acknowledge that that is the prime motivator in Scotland. Might not like it, the unionists hate it, but it's never going to go away until that is settled. Now, next week is the SNP conference. Now, I don't know what's going to happen there, none of us do. But my advice to anyone now, when they go to that conference, and if it's still going to be, you know, more of the same, doubling down, I'm saying now, jump ship, rebels. Now's the time to jump ship, because next week, for those of you who are concerned out there that Scotland United is not your cup of tea, it could be over by next week if the SNP don't start doing something. I'm saying, if you're a rebel in the SNP, the time has come to either change them or jump ship. What do you think?
I think that they should stop by at some of these supermarkets and go into the sell-by dates and get some tomatoes and eggs and pelt the stage with them and show their disgust at this rubbish that is running the party now. And, you know, Eva's right in everything she says. In fact, every time I listen to Eva, I want to paint my face blue and dig up a claymore, but I don't have a claymore. I'll have to get a metal detector out. It's just so depressing, and it is down to the membership. You know, they're the ones who elected these people to sit on the stage, and they can bring them down as well as put them up. So for God's sake, get some spine, grow a spine, and get rid of the rubbish that is dragging this country into the gutter. It shouldn't be. Scotland, per head of population, should be up there with Qatar. You know, it should be one of the wealthiest nations in the world. And we're being dragged down by those lot in Westminster. And it's how far are we going to be dragged down before somebody finally says enough? You know, look at the Palestinians today. They haven't got any conventional weapons, and yet they've launched a strike on the fourth largest army in the world, by land, by sea, and by air. Heroic people who are fighting a resistance, which they're allowed to do under international law. And they must look at us and think that we're mad. All we have to do to change our condition is put a bloody cross on the ballot paper and get independence. These people are killing themselves, literally, or being killed for freedom. We don't even have to go anywhere near that route. We can do it politically. We can do it in numbers. We can do it through Scotland United. For God's sake, wake up, everybody, and get behind the banner, Scotland United.
Yeah, get your claymores out. Phil, do you not think it's time that the it's really time for the rebels, the people who profess to be rebels within the SNP. The change isn't coming. If it doesn't come next week, it's time for them to jump ship. Do you agree?
Definitely. It's this radical surgery, we've said it is required. Remove all of Nicola's ilk, the infected. And I don't want Humza. Humza, don't lift up the phone. For me, you're not welcome. You're not good enough. You should just bugger off. You bugger off and take that cabal with you, because you cannot be trusted. You cannot be trusted. You sold us out, and if you've betrayed us, it's not good enough. I don't care how nice you are. You bat your eyelids at me, I'm more likely to kick you in the chuckies for what you've done, to be completely honest with you. So not impressed. Sling your hook, boy. You're not welcome, and not in the leadership of. You're not a leader. People will not follow you. You're lacking in too many departments, and I wish him as a human being and a fellow Scot. I wish him well, like I would all of us, and even the unionists. But the sad reality is, he's much more of a unionist than he is a man of independent mind. Because if he had an independent mind, and if he had independence at the forefront of his mind, he would not be behaving the way he is behaving. So no, sling it. Qatar, mentioned by Yvonne. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Qatar Petroleum, I worked there. We should be one of the wealthiest nations on planet Earth. And what's significant about it, having socialist leanings, we would look after the people who live and work in Scotland. And Eva's anger, 100% justified. I mean, but we need the surgery. We need to remove people like Humza, who are in the way of the progress that our people need to make, just to have a fair crack at the whip, just to get rid of these, not rid, but to manage them and deal with the problems that we have. We need control. We need independence and nothing less. It's the only thing. It keeps coming back to that. And it keeps coming back to who's willing to go up and do something about it. Because what we're taking on are the 77th Brigade, MI5, those who understand what's at stake here. Because the money that has been made from Scotland's people, Scotland's resources, including its people, but primarily oil, gas, fishing, everything, is what's at stake here, and they understand it all too well. London understands it all too well. Most people are not aware or unaware of just how wealthy Scotland is and what resources we have. But go back to that, just look at how 8.3% of the population, with 96.5% of the oil, 65% of the gas, all the new findings of the West Coast, 66% of the, and I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember exactly, of the sea area. And then you got all the minerals off the coast, then you've got 8.3% of the population with 66% of the fish by landings. It's just, it's such a wealthy, resource-rich country that we can afford to look after our own, and we will. The problem is, it's currently in the hands of the elitists and the greedy, and they don't want that to change, which is why they use every trick in the book that the British establishment, the whole divide and rule philosophy, and that is working. And if you've sold out to the Brits as you have, Humza, you can jog on, mate. You're not part of this, and you can. And that's not to say there's not a way back, but you will not be leading it, and you won't be playing a major role in it. You can admit, come clean, expose what's going on, and then you can vote for independence, and you can stay a member of the SNP, but we need to out the corruption and the cancer that has gotten to the core of the SNP, and particularly the leadership.
Well said. A great way to finish the show. The clock, as always, ladies and gentlemen, has beaten us. I again say sorry that we couldn't bring you the show with a live audience, but we now have got some. The next one is going to be at the end of the month when we're at the conference. We're doing a show there, and hopefully everything will be hunky-dory by then. The techies will have that sorted. And we look forward to seeing you all there. And I hope till then, you and yours take care. Please do.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.